The PlayStation goggles are a win for gamers, not for the metaverse. Sony's new 550 headset offers best-in-class virtual reality gaming, but it's still hard to see why we need VR goggles at all. The metaverse. Will a fantasy where our office meetings and social gatherings take place mostly in virtual reality ever come true? As a tech critic who has worn almost every pair of virtual reality goggles released in the last 7 years, I've been holding my breath for a long time. And based on my testing of this year's first big hardware release in the metaverse category, Sony's PlayStation VR 2, which arrives Wednesday, I've concluded that VR still has a ways to go before becoming a mainstream staple for work and play. To be clear, the PlayStation VR 2, priced at $550, is one of the best pieces of VR hardware you can buy. The curvy white headset plugs into the PlayStation 5 console, which is equipped with a powerful computer to run high-resolution games more smoothly. By contrast, Meta's VR devices, including its 400 Oculus Quest 2 and 1500 Quest Pro, work wirelessly and rely on slower computing chips built into the headsets. Also, unlike Meta, Sony leans into the use of VR goggles only for gaming, a wise choice because, so far, games are the most popular VR applications, and productivity apps for taking video calls through headsets haven't gained traction. Still, none of this is enough to make VR more than a niche, even as more brands, including Apple, prepare to enter the industry. That's because many of the problems people have had with VR headsets since the get-go, including their off-putting aesthetic and high price, remain for the PlayStation VR 2 goggles. That being the case, I can recommend them to enthusiasts but not to those who play the occasional video game. Here's how I felt about virtual reality and the metaverse after a week of testing the PlayStation VR 2. VR has yet to find a truly killer app. Why use VR for making video calls, streaming movies, or playing games when the existing methods already work well? This is the perennial question surrounding the metaverse. Despite making progress with the technology, the new PlayStation goggles don't offer a clear answer. The most compelling new game I tried was Horizon Call of the Mountain, a VR spin-off of the best-selling PlayStation 4 title Horizon Zero Dawn, a post-apocalyptic role-playing game. In the VR game, you control the character from a first-person perspective and can swing your arms to run around and climb mountains. You can also move your hands to grab an arrow from a quiver and shoot it with a bow. It's a fun game with impressive graphics that show off the hardware's muscle, but in the end, I still preferred the gameplay and deeper story of the original Horizon Zero Dawn, which I finished years ago on the PlayStation 4. Otherwise, a majority of VR games accompanying the device's launch that I tested were relatively old and uninteresting. Those included Star Wars, Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, Tetris Effect, Connected, and Moss, which were previously released for the older Quest 2 and first-generation PlayStation VR. In general, the graphics and motion in the new PlayStation goggles looked clearer and smoother than Meta's VR products. Still, more often than not I found myself wondering why a game should be played in VR instead of on a television screen. In the Star Wars game, where you take on the role of a droid mechanic, shooting a blaster at an enemy would have been just as simple using a game controller. The same could be said about Moss, where you control a white mouse in a 3D environment. Tetris Effect Connected involves rotating pieces known as tetrominoes, just as you would in any traditional Tetris game made in the last few decades. There was no clear benefit to playing this in an immersive environment. Other games that will soon be available for PlayStation VR 2, which I could not test, include big titles like Gran Turismo 7 and Resident Evil Village. Those are popular franchises, but both were released for traditional consoles in the last 2 years. Gaming may currently be VR's killer app, but if you want fresh and exciting games, the console plus TV combo is still king. Case in point, the PlayStation VR 2 fell off my face and hit the ground when I was playing the Star Wars game and bent over to pick up a tool from the floor of a virtual space station. The wire plugged into the console also made the device feel more cumbersome than wireless headsets, and it created a tripping hazard in the living room. And like all the goggles that came before it, the PlayStation VR 2 looks pretty ridiculous. My wife couldn't resist shooting videos to mock me as I wore a headset that made me look like a character from the movie Tron. For storage, Sony includes a charging station to hold the motion controllers, which is convenient. But along with the headset, the product takes up precious space in a living room, and unlike a laptop or smartphone, VR goggles instantly make a tidy room look cluttered. For single folks, I fear that the sight of the goggles would kill the chances of a second date.